I am most certainly flying by the seat of my pants here because I wasn't planning to film this, but you know how it is when the spirit moves you. I can't think of a whole hell of a lot that's cool about getting older, honestly. But one of the things that is a benefit I can acknowledge is that we've lived a hell of a lot of life. We've gone through a lot of hard lessons, and hopefully we have learned from them. And so at my advanced age, I do have some wisdom to share. And what I'm going to share about now is that sometimes we're actually coping quite well without realizing it. I have mentioned before, I don't like certain words or phrases that come up in almost every oracle card deck. And I would say that I suck at them. Things like patience, going with the flow, surrender. I honestly would have said, I'm awful at these. I cannot manage them. I guess I'm gonna die without having accomplished any of them. And yet, it turns out that if I would just take some time to look at it a little differently, I would realize I actually am learning some of these concepts that I would have said were impossible for me. Patience. I'm not a patient person. I'm especially impatient with myself, and I'm sure many of you can relate. And yet, when I have something really important to me, a dream, I can be patient. For instance, I knew I wanted to have a baby in this life. And I was mid-30s before I got pregnant. I was with a man that already had 2 kids, said he didn't want any more. I said, fine, I'll let you know when I get to that place that I'm ready to go and we'll just part ways. I did that. And when I did that, he decided, oh, okay, we can have a kid, but we're going to get married. And so I married that man. And I did get pregnant shortly after, a few months. But I lost that baby. Destroyed my faith, broke my heart. But I didn't want to give up despite medical problems after that. And I did eventually have a beautiful child that's now 27. And I had a dream about my twin flame. And I have been incredibly patient. It looks now like it may not happen, but it was something that was very important to me, and so while I wouldn't have been patient under any other circumstances, I have been for several years. I don't have big dreams, usually. I have another one. I'll just keep it to myself for now. But I'm patient on that one too, because if something means enough to me, I can cool my jets. Going with the flow has always been a hard one for me, because I'm like, how can I go with it if you don't show me where it is? And even if I suppose I was shown where it was, I would rebel if I didn't know where it was leading me. And then there is surrender, because we think of it as like in those old westerns, raising the white flag, waving it and saying, I give up. It's hard for me to give up. I am tenacious, or like a dog with a bone, I guess. And so surrender has been particularly hard for me until I realized that if I quit looking at it in that old Western kind of way, surrendering actually is acceptance, which is going with the flow. Those aren't that different. When I lost my career and everything of any kind of significant value because of that, I had a very hard time dealing with it because I didn't know who I was if I couldn't make money. And being limited in what used to be no effort at all in several areas was very hard for me to accept. But eventually, I realized I just had to accept that the normal I knew was no longer. This was a new normal. Once I quit fighting it, and after all, what could I have done about it? It just was what it was. It wasn't so hard to take. This twin flame thing. Fighting it the whole way, the separation and having such an important connection that didn't seem to be coming together. And yet, finally having gotten closure, I'm learning that I can accept it because it's basically going with the flow of where Spirit is leading me, leading him, leading us. Apparently it's not in the same direction. But fighting these things, putting up that resistance, just prolongs the suffering. So if I could encourage you to ignore those triggering words and look at things differently, I think that it might be easier to think of acceptance rather than surrendering or going with the flow. Because you know what we resist persists. If we just take it out of that triggering framing, the surrender and the old Western definition, it's not quite as hard to take. Not saying it's easy by any means to go with the flow when we don't know where the flow is taking us. But it's sure a hell of a lot easier to lean back in the canoe and just float down the river than it is to be paddling upstream, isn't it? We're not salmon after all. So, maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't. But I'll sign off to the accompaniment of the neighbor sprinkler and wish you a good evening.